Ipagpatuloy natin ang usapang variables. Kanina sa part 1, medyo nakita na natin yung ilan sa mga uri ng variables na madalas natin na nakikita kapag tayo ay nagsusulat or nagbabasa ng research. So, dito sa picture na ito, nakita natin yung kabuuan ng mga variables na ating tatalakayin sa lesson na ito. So, na-discuss na natin ang variables or tinatawag na data. Natapos na rin tayo sa qualitative variables or tinatawag natin na categorical variables. Yung quantitative variables naman, ito ay tinutukoy din na numerical variables. Non-experimental variables are used when we do not manipulate data. So today, ipagpapatuloy lang natin yung tinatawag natin na experimental variables. Tingnan natin kung ano ang ibig sabihin nito, ha? Okay, in an experimental research, there is what we call manipulation of variables. So, in experimental research, the variable is also called a scientific variable or an experimental variable. So here, it involves manipulation or control of variables. We have to remember that an experimental variable can be either an independent or a dependent variable. But there is a third type, yung tinatawag natin na control variable. So here, you have the independent, dependent, and the control variable. Yung independent variable, it remains unaffected in the study. Yung dependent variable naman is the variable that is being measured or tested. A control variable remains constant and unchanging towards the duration of the experiment or the study. Look at this illustration for a clearer idea. Okay, so here we have an independent variable. This is the one thing that we do not change. We usually limit this to only one in an experiment. On the other hand, the dependent variable is the change that happens because of the independent variable. So, itong dependent variable ay apektuhan siya nitong independent variable. Okay? Yung control variable naman, ito yung mga bagay na hindi natin ginagalaw sa ating study or sa ating research. Okay? So, tingnan natin na kung ano ang example. So, dito sa picture, makikita natin yung independent variable, dependent variable, at saka yung control variable. Halimbawa na ang research question ay ganito. Does red light affect plant growth? So here, what are the variables? So you have red light and you have plant growth. Pero yung red light na to ay specific talaga siya, no? So we just refer to it as the light colors, no? Or yung liwanag or ilaw, yung kulay ng mga ilaw. And the dependent variable is the plant height. So, growth kasi So, ano ba? How do you measure growth? Then, we measure the height of the plant. So, again, yung light color, okay, yun ang ating independent variable. So, it can be yellow, it can be red, it can be green, it can be blue, it can be black, or just the regular bulb that we use in the house. Dependent variable refers to the growth of the plant. In this case, how do we measure the effect or how does the light color affect the growth of the plant? And how do we measure it? By trying to find out its height. Okay? So, mini-measure natin yung height para malaman natin kung naging mabilis ba ang paglago or paglaki or pagtaas ng puno. Ano yung mga control variables? Example ay water. So, gaano kadalas mo siya dinidiligan? So, halimbawa na, yung first group ng iyong plants ay dinidilagan mo araw-araw. Yung pangalawang grupo ay isang beses isang linggo. Yun namang soil, pwedeng pare-pareho nga. Tingnan nyo ha. Pwedeng yung control at saka yung experimental group ay pareho lang na red light yung ginamit doon sa bulb, pero magkaiba naman sila ng klase ng soil. So, ang kinontrol dito, yung soil, ano? So, sa group A, loam soil. Dito naman sa group B ay yung compost na soil, ano? And group C ay pwedeng iba naman. And so on. So, yun yung tinatawag natin na control variables. Now, let's talk about the different or other variables that we see in research writing. So, meron tayong tinatawag na predictor and criterion variables. Isama na rin natin yung other types of variables. Yung predictor variables saka yung criterion variables, usually, ginagamit natin to sa quasi-experimental research, no? To see the effect of one variable to another variable. So, yung predictor variable is used to predict outcomes, while the criterion variable is predicted from one or more variables. And then later, we are going to talk about the extraneous, compounding, mediating, intervening, or moderating variables, no? So, what is an extraneous variable? So, here you have again a chart or an illustration of an independent variable and a dependent variable. So, showing the effect of the independent variable to the dependent variable. So, in this instance, we can ask the question, how the independent variable affect the dependent variable? On the other hand, there can be other variables that can influence the dependent variable, but the researcher failed to identify it at the onset or at the beginning of his or her research. So when we say extraneous, these are variables that may or can affect the dependent variable in one way or another. So looking closely, let's have a more specific example. Let's say drinking coffee is your independent variable and your dependent variable is heart disease. Okay? So, we have to ask the question, does drinking coffee lead to heart disease? If it is an experimental research, no? Now, there may also be other factors leading to heart disease, which the researcher overlooked when he first identified the variables that he is going to include in his or her study. Okay, so ano ba yung mga other factors na yun na pwedeng maging dahilan or pwedeng mag-lead sa heart disease? Okay, so yung focus niya kasi drinking coffee lang no? Pero yung pala, yung respondents or subjects in the study ay naninigarilyo din. Or yung iba ay hindi maganda yung kanilang diet. So, ang variable na yan ay tinatawag natin na extraneous variable kasi hindi natin siya na-determine agad and yet pwede itong makaapekto sa tinatakbo ng ating study. Bakit? Kasi pwedeng makaapekto siya doon sa dependent variable kahit na ang ating independent variable lang na sinet ay drinking coffee. Okay, let's take a look at another type of variable. So here you have independent variable and then dependent variable. So how does an independent variable affect the dependent variable? Pero meron tayong tinatawag na confounding variable. Yung confounding variable, parang extraneous variable siya, no? Remember, yung extraneous variable, ito yung mga variables na hindi kaagad natin na-identify at naisama sa ating research, pero in the long run, pwedeng makaapekto sa ating experiment or sa ating study. So, what is a confounding variable? A confounding variable is a variable that is associated with both the independent and the dependent variable. So here, a confounding variable influences the independent variable and the independent variable. Okay? Meron siyang epekto pareho sa IV at saka sa DV. Ngayon, ano pagkakaiba ng extraneous variable doon sa confounding? Na in fact ay yung confounding ay isang klase ng extraneous variable. Ang pagkakaiba nila, yung extraneous variable, ang directly na naiimpluwensyahan niya ay yung dependent variable, gaya na ipinapakita natin dito sa illustration na ito. Okay, so let's continue with a more specific example. So, halimbawa na kanina sinabi natin, drinking coffee yung ating independent variable, ano? At paano ito maaaring makaapekto sa kalusugan ng isang tao, particularly yung pagkakaroon niya ng heart disease. Ngayon, meron tayong tinatawag na confounding variable. Halimbawa na, work yung confounding variable mo or type of work of the respondents. Yung kasing work, pwedeng nakakaapekto yun eh. Saan? Sa pag-inom ng kape. Halimbawa na, kung ikaw ay isang call center agent at lagi kang nasa graveyard shift, hindi ba naaapektuhan nun yung pag-inom ng kape? Halimbawa na, kailangan mong manatiling gising sa magdamag. So, maaaring mas madalas kang uminom ng kape dahil sa pagiging call center agent mo kaysa kung ikaw ay nasa ibang klase ng trabaho. So here, the confounding variable affects the independent variable in the same way that it affects the dependent variable. Pwede rin naman na yung work ay maging sanhi ng pagkakaroon mo ng heart disease, ano? Bakit? So, halimbawa na, napaka-stressful ng work mo. It can lead to having a heart disease. Or, halimbawa na, yung work mo ay kailangan talaga ng physical na lakas, pero hindi kinakaya, no, ng puso mo. Pwede rin yun. So, ang tawag natin dyan, confounding variables. Again, confounding variable because it affects the IV and also affects the DV. Okay. On the other hand, the extraneous variable only affects the dependent variable. Okay. This is just an example, okay, of a confounding variable and an extraneous variable in one particular study. Let's look at another type of variable. This time, let's use the predictor and the criterion variable. Nakalimitan natin ginagamit sa quasi-experimental research. So here, we have a mediating variable. Pagka sinabi nating mediating variable, tinatawag din to na mediator variable. It explains the process through which two variables are related. Okay, so anong relasyon ng dalawang variables? Okay, so yan ang tinatawag natin na mediating. Pagka naman sinabi nating moderating variable or moderator variables, it affects the strength and direction of that relationship. Okay. Explain natin ha. Yung predictor variables, okay, naaapektuhan niya yung criterion variables. Pero, meron tayong tinatawag na mediating variable. So, yung mediating variable, naaapektuhan siya ng predictor variables. Na ang mediating variables naman ay nakakaapekto sa criterion variable. So, sa halip na dumiretso, meron siyang other factors dito papunta doon sa criterion. Okay? So, nakita ninyo. Ano naman yung moderating? Okay, moderating ito ha. So, yung moderating variables, naglalagay tayo niyan para maapektuhan naman yung lakas or yung strength and direction of that relationship. Kasi dito nagkaroon tayo ng parang chain or causal effect yan. Okay, so bigyan natin ng example para mas maintindihan. So again, yung predictor variable mo, distance learning. Ngayon, ano yung pwedeng maapektuhan ng distance learning? So sabihin natin na academic performance, ng mga estudyante. Again, direct effect. What is the effect of distance learning to the students' academic performance, especially during the pandemic? Okay, so ayan. Ngayon, lagyan natin siya ng tinatawag na mediating variables or mediator, So, ano yung nasa gitna niya? So, anong pwedeng makaapekto? Okay. So, lagyan natin ng learning strategy. So, yung distance learning, pwedeng naaapektuhan yan yung learning strategy. Again, mediating variable ang pinag-uusapan natin. Halimbawa na, ano ba sinasabi natin sa learning strategy? Dahil ito ay distance learning, natatamad siya na mag-aral. Okay? Di ba? Learning strategy yun eh. Or, negative nga lang. Dahil ngayon ay distance learning ang ginagamit sa pag-aaral at pagtuturo, yung mga bata ay lalo namang nagsisikap, Learning strategy yon. So, yung learning strategy, okay, ay epekto ng distance learning. Okay? Ngayon, yung learning strategy, paano siya nakakaapekto sa dependent variables? So, halimbawa na, dahil ito ay distance learning at pinipilit ng estudyante na mag-aral talaga, anong nangyayari sa academic performance? So, maaaring tumataas ang kanyang academic performance. Yun namang negatibo na learning strategy, yung tinamad. Kasi hindi nakikita yung teacher. Tinamad, hindi nakikita yung crush. Tinamad dahil nahihirapan, walang matanungan, So, anong nagiging epekto nito sa academic performance? So, pwedeng bumababa. Again, sa halip na diretso yung kanyang epekto dito, ang nangyayari, merong mga ibang factors na pumapasok, So, mediating variable siya kapag, okay, ito ay nakaka-apekto din sa dependent variable. So, anong pwede natin gawin kapag nakita natin na merong lumabas na mediating variables? Ang mabuti natin gawin dyan ay lagyan natin ng moderating variables or moderator variables. Yung iba, tinatawag din ito na intervention. Okay. So, para maiwasan yung negative impact ng distance learning sa learning strategy ng mga bata, pwedeng magkaroon ng moderator or moderating variables. In this particular examples, pwedeng ang teacher, okay, ay mag-introduce ng tutorial video. Bakit? Para kung nahihirapan siya dito sa kanyang learning strategy, hindi kasi siya makakonsentrate hindi niya maintindihan kasi hindi niya naririnig kung ano sinasabi ng teacher, kung ano ba ang hindi niya naiintindihan, kung ano yung binabasa niya sa module. So, ano pwedeng gawin? Lagyan ng moderating variable. Moderating or moderator variable. Okay, so maglalagay ngayon dito ng tutorial videos para kahit hindi nakikita yung teacher, yung mga estudyante na nahihirapan ay hindi naman masyadong maapektuhan yung kanilang academic performance. So again, ang tawag natin dito ay moderating variables. Nilalagyan natin ng kumbaga, tinutulungan natin para hindi niya maramdaman yung full impact, no? So kung negative yung kanyang learning strategy, pinipigilan natin na bumaba ng tuluyan yung kanyang academic performance. Kung ito naman ay okay naman ang kanyang learning strategy, ang pagkakaroon ng tutorial video or moderating variables ay nakakatulong naman para mas lalong paunlarin yung kanyang pag-aaral. Okay? Mediating variable, moderating variable. Let's continue. Let's take a look at this, Okay, so halimbawa na, ito ang title natin, Blended Learning and Grade 12 STEM Students Level of Perception of Their Academic Performance. So, ano ba ang independent variable natin dyan? Siyempre yung blended learning. Ano ang dependent variable? Yung level of academic performance. Level of perception. Ano yung pananaw nila tungkol sa kanilang academic performance? Diba minsan, sinasabi ng mga natin sa sarili natin, hindi ako nag-perform na mabuti. Wala, ang pangit ang performance ko. Or, you can say, good ang performance ko. So, yung blended learning, titingnan natin. Ano ba ang connection nito? Ano ba ang epekto nito? Anong nangyayari sa dependent variable? Yung academic performance. Tumataas ba ito o bumababa? Pero meron tayong tinatawag na extraneous variables. Ano yung extraneous variables? Yung mga variables na hindi kaagad natin na-determine or hindi natin kaagad na isama doon sa ating study. So, ano ba ang mga pwede pang makaapekto? Halimbawa na, yung availability of learning materials. Ay, kulang yung modules. Hindi ako makakasabay sa mga kaklase ko. So, pwede bang baka bumaba ang performance ko kasi wala akong nakuhang module. Availability pa rin yun. Availability of learning materials. Ang daming available materials. So, anong pwedeng mangyari? Yung level of performance, pwedeng tumaas kasi ang daming available materials, okay? Another extraneous variable. Ang sinabi lang kasi blended learning, no? So, yung another extraneous variable, pwedeng internet connection, Gusto ko namang manood ng tutorial video, Kaya lang wala akong connection. Wala rin akong pambili ng load. Okay, so pwedeng na-overlook. Pwede rin namang stress. Another variable that can affect the level of perception. Siyempre, habang nai-stress ka, mas lalong hindi mo na pag-iisipan ng mabuti yung mga bagay na dapat mong pinagtutuunan ng pansin. Okay. So, kung igagawa natin siya ng chart or ng illustration, ganito makikita natin, no? So, here you have blended learning, dependent variable, level of perception on academic performance. So, does the use of blended learning increase the level of perception of academic performance of STEM students? Predictor criterion, But there may also be other factors affecting the perception on academic performance. Pwedeng availability of learning materials, internet connection, stress, and other things. So, another example, we have the predictor variable and the criterion variable. In this instance, let's take for example that this is the title of the research. Conduct of guidance counseling programs and absenteeism and dropout rate among grade 11 students. So, ang ating predictor variable ay guidance counseling program. Ano ang ating criterion? Absenteeism and dropout rate. Kapag iyan ay in-illustrate natin, ganito ang makikita natin. guidance counseling program, absenteeism, and dropout rate. Okay. Nakakaapekto ba yung pagkakaroon ng guidance counseling program sa pag-absent or pagliban ng mga estudyante or sa pagda-drop out nila? Predictor variable, criterion variable. Dagdagan pa natin yung illustration, ano? So, we are still on the guidance counseling program and absenteeism and dropout rate. Okay. So, idagdag natin yung tinatawag natin na mediating variables and moderating variables. So, anong pwedeng mediating variables? Yung nakakahadlang or kaya ay nakaka-cause din ng effect para sa dependent variable. So, yung guidance counseling program, it can be faced with the student's beliefs and attitudes. So, counseling program na naman, ayoko na yan. Iba na lang, wag na yan. Okay? Hindi naman, wala namang nangyayari. It's a belief, it's an attitude. So, kung ganun yung belief and attitude nila, ibig sabihin, maaapektuhan pa rin yung absenteeism and dropout rate dahil hindi naman sila naniniwala dun sa guidance counseling program. Ang tendency, mag-a-absent pa rin sila, magda-drop pa rin sila. Pero iniiwasan nga natin to eh. Okay? Yung mediating variable na yan. So, anong pwede nating gawin? Maglagay tayo ng moderating variable. So, halimbawa na, yung guidance counseling program, yung guidance office, pwede siyang maglagay ng intervention. Yan. Intervention para mabawasan yung lakas or magnitude or degree ng effect. Okay? Nitong independent variable dito sa mediating at nung mediating dito sa dependent. So, lagay tayo dito ng moderating or moderator variables. Usap tayo. Project. Okay? Wherein, yung mga estudyante pwedeng makipag-usap sa guidance counselor sa kanilang mga concern para mabawasan yung absenteeism and dropout rate. Okay? So, thank you for listening. I hope you have learned something from this lesson. And you can always ask a question by writing it down on the comment section so I can answer them in the next video lesson. Thank you. And let us all stay safe. God bless you.